All right, good morning. I'm trying to be able to speak to you this morning because, as most of you know, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. So thank you for being here. As I was thinking about my motherhood journey, I realized that I was actually really excited to share from this particular topic, which is strange because it is a really heavy one. But I started to think about why I was enthusiastic about this, and part of it too, when I get to talk about my daughter as much as I want, which is fabulous. But deeper than that, it was in my greatest sorrow that the joy of the Lord met me. And it was in my weakest moments that the strength of God truly turned me through each day. And it was when I was on my knees, saw my pain and suffering in this world, that I was given a renewed understanding and hope in the cross of Christ and the beauty of heaven. And so, as I thought about my story, I realized it's really not so much a story about me as it's a story about God. It's not so much about my loss as it is His work in my life. And so that makes me excited. So as we talk, because there's a lot of hard stuff in my story, I want you to keep in mind the punchline of the little thing as in eternity. And that's that God mends and Christ defeats death. And that shining thread of hope can be kept in mind at every moment of a believer's life, because there is going to be a lot of hard stuff along the way, as Pastor Sandra said, in every single person's life. So with that hope in mind, let's go into some of that hard stuff. This morning, I'm basically going to give you an overview of my whole motherhood journey from beginning to present, specifically focusing on my losses and hardships. So in case you're wondering when I'm almost done, until we get to 2021. It just feels like each experience continues to build on the last one and shapes my understanding of God and His character. So it feels hard to just skip around or stop at a funeral. It feels like it's a continual process of learning God's character as I live life, and as I seek to be more like Him, and He continues to make me more like Himself. I think we call that sanctification. So we've heard of it. My motherhood journey actually begins at the same time that we joined this church, which is really cool because you all have been one of our greatest blessings through our parenthood journey. We were near to Greenville and joined in the fall of 2016. And I was very early in my first pregnancy when I became members. So I won't spend long on this pregnancy at all. I'll just say there were some minor hiccups that kind of opened my eyes to the other side of pregnancy, you might say. But really, for the most part, it was my most healthy full-term pregnancy that I've had. So we'll just say, and just kind of leave it there and say that we welcomed Jackson into the world in June of 2017. So he gets the least amount of time this morning, but he has been truly one of God's good gifts to us to have as we walked a very hard road that was soon came. So sometime later, we found out we were expecting baby number 2. And the due date was right around Jackson's 2nd birthday. And so before we get too far into pregnancy, we'll just say, any notions about crying in front of other people, just leave those at the door, because there's a lot of hard stuff here. We'll say anyone into crying the barefoot. I might cry, I might not cry, I just have no idea. So I got box of Kleenex, and again, it keeps on my tears in the bottle. So we'll just keep rolling. But this second pregnancy that we would learn to be Annabelle, it began actually more smoothly than the first. The first 18 weeks were truly a textbook pregnancy. And on January 14th, 2019, that's when our lives changed. As most naive parents do, we went to the 18-week anatomy scan simply to find out the gender of our baby. When the ultrasound technician said she couldn't tell, we simply thought that the baby wasn't in a good position that day, and we would come back next week and be able to find out. By the way, ultrasound technicians are not able to discuss any negative findings with you. So I have a love-hate relationship with those fine people after these years. But when my doctor came in, she immediately said, I'm very concerned about your baby. She probably said that 5 times, I'm very concerned about your baby. They could not detect any amniotic fluid surrounding Annabelle. It wasn't just low, there was none. And within hours, I was downtown, seeing maternal fetal specialists getting additional scans. And that's when worse was confirmed. The doctor explained that amniotic fluid is produced by the baby's kidneys. It comes out, is ingested, goes to the kidney, then comes out, and that's the cycle of amniotic fluid. The absence of amniotic fluid indicates a problem with the baby's kidneys. So rather than having 2 healthy kidneys, Annabelle had one kidney that was completely absent, and the other one was multicystic dysplastic, meaning that something went wrong in the formation of it, and so it's just not functioning. Without amniotic fluid, by God's design, a baby's lungs will also not fully develop. So Annabelle would be born without functioning kidneys or lungs, the latter, which is actually more immediately deadly. The doctor looked at us with tears in her eyes and said, "This is lethal to the baby. I'm very sorry to have to tell you that." And if there's ever been a time where I was grateful for just lack of understanding, lack of knowing the details I would see work out in those coming months, it was then. In those first moments, there was one thing I had to process as they sent me home, and that was that my baby was seemed like to die. So I can't quite describe the immediate battle that was raging within me. My flesh felt hopeless and weak and afraid, yet because the Holy Spirit lived within us, as soon as I felt these emotions, peace and strength and hope seemed to barge in, and I often couldn't tell which was stronger. I had it come with tears in those first few days, and I'm going to say my first reaction was to go hide in a cave and just have someone pick me up me in 6 months when all of this had passed. I really don't want to talk about it with anyone outside of a few family and friends. And we still realized that this journey was actually not going to be a short one. And a follow-up appointment the following week, we got a lot of our questions answered. The doctor explained that while in the little, the baby suffers no harm, mother's body completely sustains its life, and there is no need for functioning kidneys and lungs. There was a slight risk of stillbirth, but the doctors should likely be able to carry this baby full terms, and if done alive, my baby would have minutes to hours on this earth. We were offering childrenation 3 different times in those initial weeks, but because we believed in the sanctity of life and that each life is precious in the sight of God, we did choose life. The thought of my due date being nearly 5 months away was incredibly daunting. Knowing I would need to continue to dispel questions from family and friends, I started a blog to keep my friends and family up to date. And so began what was a fairly public journey through loss, which was, like I said, neither intended nor wanted on day one. But it turns out you don't just lose a baby at nearly full term without people knowing. Many are plans in the man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that fails. And that's a verse that continues to resonate in my heart over the years. And as I learned that not only does the Lord's purpose prevail, but it is truly best. It was best that we didn't want that journey alone. Ultrasound images are very difficult to read without amniotic fluid. So in those first weeks, we learned to grieve, but still we didn't know the baby's gender. And so my heart focused on Psalm 109. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, my soul knows it very well. So we found rest in knowing that our Creator made this child just as He intended. I reminded myself incessantly of God's promises that He was very faithful and loving, that He was working for my good and His glory, that one day these tears would be wiped away. And I just prayed that all of these scriptures that I had rolling around in my head all my life would transform my heart and my mind. And after those first days and weeks passed, the fog lifted, questions were answered, and the truth of Scripture did sink deeply into my heart. I was still fearful of the months that lay before me, of seeing my growing belly, of the congratulatory remarks of strangers, of seeing my wife with baby, of seeing it take its rental breath. And so life became a daily surrender of fears, and the Lord seeing me with a little bit of joy in the journey. Nearly 4 weeks after the diagnosis, we did receive results of our genetic test that our baby was a girl. The loss became much more real, knowing that, but we determined that if we were going to have a daughter, she was going to live her life fully. So we took photos regularly and on each passing holiday. We took snapshots at each place we went, at the beach, the zoo, church, a coffee shop. We took video snippets, and I saved every ultrasound photo. I didn't have a wedding dress shopping with her. We lived with her and we loved her as completely as we could for the time we had her, and God gave us joy in that journey. We named her of hope, and we spoke to her and about her by name. The doctor's appointments were constant. I was grateful for the extra time I got to see her on the screen, but each visit did end the same way. There was no change in her diagnosis. And I also met with care teams from the hospital. I had a team of doctors and nurses that walked us through a long list of items to consider, specific plans should she be born still, or a lot of medications to make her comfortable for a short time, whether we would want any intervention, knowing it really wouldn't change anything, how I would make memories and keepsakes with her at the hospital, and even enter the difficult description of what she would look like in her final moments on this earth. So I wanted to walk in the wisdom of each day, plan what makes sense to plan, do the next thing, right? So we chose a funeral home and a cemetery plot. I got a pretty pink dress for the day she was born and a beautiful white gown for her to be buried in. The gift of time turned out to be a great blessing, and after a couple of months, it seemed we had kind of even developed a strange routine in the wait, marked by both smiles and tears. And on a Sunday at 33 weeks, I awoke with slight discomfort. By the afternoon, mild contractions were regularly coming in. I'm not really one to insist on maternity photos, but it was important for me to get photos of our whole family alive at that time. And they were scheduled for that evening. What a gift to have those mild contractions continue but not intensify until later that evening. Those details don't go unnoticed by God. By 2 a.m. Monday morning, the pain was intense and we headed to the hospital. As we waited to be admitted to the hospital, my husband and I reflected on even the seemingly insignificant answers to prayer along the way that God allowed us to do so many things in the midst of party. We got those maternity photos then just a few hours ago. I put together complete outfits for Annabelle to wear. We had taken pictures and videos along the journey. We had met with pastors and funeral homes about services. I never had to go to a doctor's appointment and find out that my child's heart had stopped beating. He gave us the strength to get pointing heard about Annabelle's diagnosis. The day we heard she was a girl and the day he chose her spot at the cemetery. God taking care of the big and the small. He would give us strength in the next few hours. Our final earnest prayer was that we would get to meet her alive. Annabelle moved very quickly. The room was silent as there was no one ever speaking, and hers was just very solemnly helping me along. There was no rescue plan in place should there be distress in labor. And at 7:45 a.m. on that early morning, April 29th, my daughter Annabelle Ironside was born. And there she was, living, breathing, and cremain. She was born with a fatal condition, non-functioning Kimkus, undeveloped lungs 6.5 weeks early, born breech, by the way, and she was alive and crying. So don't tell me God doesn't answer prayers. Annabelle's time with us was very short. For 40 minutes, we cuddled her and memorized every picture that God designed. We talked to her and sang happy birthday. Within the course of an hour, I experienced the intensity of labor pains, followed by the extreme joy of meeting my baby girl alive, and then the deep sorrow of watching her pass. So I'm not sure how to describe that kind of roller coaster of emotions that all happened within the same hour. Yet God's grace really carried us through each moment. He gave us peace in that hour to simply love and enjoy Annabelle. And he gave us the grace to gently and tearfully embrace when our 40 minutes have passed and then they came to be parents. We took photos. We had Big Brother stop by, and even all of Annabelle's grandparents flew across the country that day to meet her. Again, a gift of time at the hospital was precious. And then I had to set her down for the final time on this earth and left the hospital without flying to porn. We had a beautiful celebration of Annabelle's life 5 days later, knowing it would be my only public celebration of her. I actually really enjoyed it and was just grateful for everyone that came and the acclamation of hope that was given on that day. Those first few weeks, there was a battle between thanksgiving and sorrow within me. Deep sorrow because those 40 minutes just flew by and passed so quickly. Yeah, such thanksgiving because I had those 33 weeks and those 40 minutes along with a multitude of answered prayers along the way. And so how can I possibly be angry over such an incredible gift? Joy and sorrow intimately intertwined. Peace beyond my understanding that continued to show up. Because God, in no other way meant to be who he is, a God of comfort, peace, and faithfulness. yet weak and at a loss. In the months surrounding Annabelle's diagnosis and death, I never really felt the need to question God. Why me? I felt at peace knowing that I was just like every other person on this planet. I was a sinner in need of a savior. I knew I didn't really deserve the suffering any more or less than the next person, so I kind of just simply told myself, why not me? I felt with very real comfort of God and support the church body giving me peace month after month, and knew that God was working for my good and His glory. My Job moment came months after Annabelle's death. That fall, I had recovered for childbirth, presumed eternal life, and again wanted it as a baby. We had opened our hearts to raising another child of our own over a year ago. And he suffered loss, recovered, and we're now met with month after month of negative pregnancy tests. And so I finally broke down. God, why? Why me? I avoided this question all year long. And finally, as it seemed that everyone else moved on the puffy babies, I finally asked, why me? Why did my baby have to die? And I knew I wouldn't fully know the answer, and knew my finite brain could wrap my mind around mind of an infinite God. But as I thought of this question, my heart settled on it in a different light, and so I began to wonder from a different angle. Why me? Why would the holy God in the earth save someone such as I? Why would my God go through His own pain of a child box to rescue a despicable sinner like me? And this was the truth I would never understand. In Isaiah it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts and your thoughts." So if I combine rest, never fully understanding my unmerciful God, would lavish on me the eternal gift of salvation, shall I not also trust the same God in my temporary pain? If the eternal security of both Annabelle and me is placed in His hands, should I question His perfect timing and her number of days? How could I dare shake my content when King has broken His body tonight? The timing of many things of my Motherhood journey amazes me. And pointing to a God that cares for details and a person's life that cares without details. As January 14th, 2020 neared the one-year anniversary of Annabelle's diagnosis, grief was heavy, and I thought about the many tears shed over the past year and the prosperity that we had endured. A couple of days on that anniversary date, a positive pregnancy test finally came. We were able to tell our parents on that one-year anniversary, and it was a glimmer of hope on that day when the first foot came. As I began to tell friends about this baby, I've been so excited for you. Are you so excited? To be honest, nope, I was terrified. For a lot of women after loss, that day of loss moans in our pits, right? I just need to make it past such and such number of weeks, and then I'll relax. For me, her diagnosis didn't happen until 18 weeks. We didn't actually lose her until an hour after she was born. When was I supposed to relax? But the Lord in my heart and view that this new pregnancy journey would simply be used to continue to sanctify His often a heart that still very much needed it. Knowing that there really wasn't life that I could convince myself things would be fine and that I could relax, my heart turned to not just daily, but moment and moment surrender of this child to God. The entire third pregnancy felt like I was continually being pushed to the edge time and time again with something else tremendous, just again and again and again. And God just kind of looked at it and was saying, "Are you still going to trust me? Maybe trust it out?" The simple way this happened was if it was actually my easiest first trimester of all of them, and my nausea was not nearly as bad, and so now I wonder where my pregnancy symptoms were. So I probably just sounded like a crazy person. But I needed to surrender this child to God. At my first EE ultrasound, we were overjoyed to see a child like a scream, and that's when the doctor then told us that there should have been two. This baby had a twin that already passed. Another loss, and the mix of emotion in that scenario was difficult. We got her into a prayer of healthy baby, and yet someone we didn't even know existed had already been taken. Again, and must very realistically surrender these children to God. My now very complicated medical history more into more frequent scans. And so a few weeks later, another ultrasound revealed that the placenta didn't look right. They wanted to send me to the specialists again once the meaning developed a little bit more a few weeks later. So more waiting, more need to trust God, more surrender. The appointment was to be the anatomy scan halfway through the pregnancy, scheduled for April 28th, 1 year to the day that I was going to labor with Annabelle. Have I mentioned God's timing? Emotions were incredibly heightened as I was full of grief over Annabelle, and yet really wanting to make her first birthday really special the following day. It was a week that I was reflecting on God's goodness and faithfulness in life and death, and was reminded that even if not, when not, God is still good. And that was a beautiful reminder as I went into that appointment. And we're also now a month into COVID, so I had to go into this appointment alone in the same office that we have received terrible news time and time again. After a long scan, the doctor walked in and said, "I'm so minded to give you good news. This baby looks great." The placenta was a variant of normal. They would continue to monitor it because it didn't look normal, but by everything they could observe, it was acting like normal, so there were no immediate concerns. Hours before we celebrated the hope of a life that we look forward to in eternity, we were given hope of a life that we could meet here on earth, and that was a good and precious gift that was spent the following day celebrating Annabelle and remembering her as a family. The rest of the pregnancy actually did go fairly smoothly through continued exams, and because the Lord's purposes continued to prevail over mine, Pepper was born 3 weeks early, with even the process of going to labor at certain aspects of delivery causing reason for concern, reason to trust. And that first hour of crying was a gift. The last time I had held the tiny infant was Annabelle, but this time the cries and movements did not stop. Tucker was given life. A week after Tucker was born, Jackson, and it was barely 3 years old, blurted out at the dinner table, "Tucker did die like Annabelle did." It kind of jolted all of us at the dinner table, to have this 3-year-old put the last couple of years of our lives so simply, and it was an accurate summary of what had occurred. I don't know why that's the story. I don't know why Tucker and not Annabelle. Why Annabelle and not Tucker. I don't know the whys, and that's okay, but I'm both praise the giver of light, for God remembers our days. A rainbow baby is usually the term for a baby born after loss, so I often thought about how we see the rainbow in the sky because of the droplets left by the storm. And so we all get a forming a baby through the remnants of our storm. Reminders that as we see Tucker hit milestones that Annabelle never had, that God is faithful in both life and death. That we don't necessarily understand the destruction and the storm, but we certainly don't deserve the beauty of the rainbow. And so even as I care for him at home, I'm reminded over and over of the faithfulness of God. So because I told you I'm going to take you up to the present, I'm going to tell you where I'm at now, which is sometimes very different than saying where you've been. Right now, 21, I am 12 weeks pregnant. And that's not meant to be a big pregnancy announcement. It's simply to tell you where I'm at and tell you the next part of my journey. I've been at a seat where pregnancy announcement stands. So this is just to tell you where I'm at now. And right now, it is still a battle. The battle of trusting God with another child, the 5th one that I'd have conceived. Not knowing the outcome, but believing that God will be glorified through it. Knowing that there is no point that I get to relax and giving that over to God. Battling the fears of loss and scary diagnoses. Trying to just walk in the wisdom of each day. Giving over my struggles to God. Knowing that no matter how many children we have, there will be a whole unhappy picture. Putting aside the question of what if I never have a girl, and the idea on how hard it is to be the mother of a daughter and not get to mother and daughter. Right now, my heart is in that of the battle of daily surrender and daily sanctification. In these some secret pregnancies, I often go back to how I had to pray during my pregnancy with Annabelle. I'm focused a lot on the verse where Jesus knew his hour had come, and he said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not I will, but yours be done." And I love the humanity that we see in Jesus there. Take this cup from me. I will tell you, I cleaned out part of it a lot. God, take this cup from me. I don't want to go through this. I don't want my daughter to die. But Jesus doesn't stop there. But not my will, but yours be done. He knew the sacrifice that he would have to make, yet he still submitted himself to the Father's will. So how do I pray like that? I was given the opportunity to know during my pregnancy with Annabelle in great detail with future. I knew what I was going to give up. I knew what it would look like, and really, even in a variety of circumstances, the way that would play out was not going to change very much. And on day one, I did not want go-till to be done because it's not only of all death. So I prayed for my will, that Annabelle would live. I prayed for a miracle to the very end. And there's nothing wrong with that. We are full to present our requests to God, but how sorely disappointed would I be with how God answers prayers if for 3.5 months I only prayed for my own will, if I only asked one thing of God that whole time, that Annabelle would live it, and he denied it. Because my heart is slow to change, God gave me 3.5 months to learn that praying isn't just about asking, it's about submitting. It's about becoming more Christ-like, and to be more like Christ, I must willingly submit to God's will even in the face of death. Not my will, but yours be done. At first, I simply prayed that I could pray that prayer, until the Lord softened my heart to actually sing that prayer, until I can say, if your will is to take her life, let it be done. And when I can say that, I began praying very differently. I began praying for all sorts of things that would fit within that will. I prayed for comfort and peace. I prayed that I would have friends and family to come along on my side to encourage me. I prayed that I would have food on the table and I was too weak to make it, that we would be financially stable through a funeral and missed work. I prayed that God would not just simply take this burden from me, but that he would sustain me through it. And when I prayed like that, I began to see answered prayer everywhere. I didn't go all prosperity gospel and think that, I figured out God's will, so I prayed a new car into it. My point is that when my heart fully submitted to God's will, even to death, I saw God's goodness and faithfulness everywhere around me. And that they were already there, and sometimes I was just too stubborn to look around and see it. I truly can't think of a time in my life that I counted so many blessings as those months when we lost Annabelle. It was a beautiful thing to be able to submit to the Father's will. And so this is the prayer that I keep coming back to through Tucker's pregnancy and through this one. Just each day, Lord, give this child life, yet not my will, but yours to be done. In this case, I don't know the future, so I'm not going to go on death, but I am going to surrender and go to both things loosely. I'm not going to walk in fear because I know the pain of loss, but I'm going to walk in faith because I saw a faithful God in the midst of loss. And so I trust God for the future of even this child. But even as I trust God with my future and with my children, that doesn't somehow magically take away the grief of today. Grief that is still real and present. Grief that thankfully looks very different than it did 2.5 years ago. It no longer overwhelms, but I still grieve, especially on important days and anniversaries. I grieve not having a 2-year-old telling me about her dolls, and soon I'll be a kindergarten, eventually a high school graduate and a bride walking down the aisle. And as I observe my own grief and grief in others through conversations, I've seen that sometimes in the moments of deep pain, it's very easy to turn inward and become selfish in grief and expect everyone around me to understand exactly what I'm going through, say I'm doing the right thing, exactly the right time, because I'm the one that's hurting. I'm sure none of you have ever felt that way on even a hard day, right? And a culture of victim mentality and seemingly every people group we can think of. I must remember that because of the grace of God in my life, I am not a victim at all. Even though I remind myself that grief does not give me the right to place unfair expectations on others. Grief does not give me the right to easily take offense. Grief does not give me the right to hold a grudge.
Grief does not give me the right to live in anger.
It does not give me the right to live in
And envy of others.
Grief does not give me the right to place guilt on myself for the loss of my child. Grief does not give me the right to isolate oneself in the church body. It does not give me the right to stop serving the body. Grief does not give me the right to act as if the greatest amount of grace ever bestowed on someone has not been bestowed upon me. Instead, grief gives me the opportunity to act upon that grace that's been so mercifully bestowed upon me. It gives me the opportunity to turn to God in lament, the beautiful art of turning to God in our pain, telling Him of our hurts, asking Him to take it away, yet trusting Him through it. Grief gives me the opportunity to tear down my crying and realize that sometimes I need help. Grief gives me the opportunity to accept help. Grief gives me an opportunity in the right place and time to help others learn how to appropriately show the grieving compassion. Grief gives me the opportunity to serve in new ways. It gives me the opportunity to grow nearer the heart of God than ever before. Grief gives me the opportunity to be sanctified in ways that are best accomplished through pain. Grief gives me the opportunity to have my soul long for heaven with renewed excitement. Grief gives me the opportunity to display to the start the same joy in the midst of my pain and suffering that I had before my sorrow ever came, because my hope is not in that I'm lost, but my hope is in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so even in the midst of grief, we somehow work our way back to hope. The same hopes that I mentioned at the beginning. Pastor Cam gave us a definition on Sunday, right? Hold a confident expectation, the hope of the living God to rescue and redeem, the hope that God amends, and that Christ defeats death. And so I will rejoice in my sufferings, knowing that my sufferings produce endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint Him. Thank you for your attention. That's from God. Are we taking a break in the Lord?
Yes.
Yes. Take a break.